There's a different because the salary changes when you're in a different thing. I can't remember where I was where I saw this, but anyhow, Salesforce is really good, and then the AWS, that's Amazon Web Services, that's cloud computing, especially with the number of jobs, you make a lot in this one as well. And I always talk about money, and I know it's not always about money, but I tell you what, that's the basic level, in my opinion. The conversation always starts at money for me, and then after that, it's the environment is very important. Uh, Always has to start with money because that pays the bills, that does everything. You're not going to be in a good mood if you're not valued. So when you're doing work, you have to be valued. So, and that was always important for me as well. Azure is.
Hi everybody, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? What? Okay, cool. So yeah, welcome to the last workshop of the day. I know you guys are getting tired, but if your friends are missing out or you want to go out halfway, just know that recordings will be available. And today we have Matt Upham with us. He's a full stack developer. And if you look at his LinkedIn, he has a very impressive background. And he's here today to show us a day in the life as a developer and also what it takes to be, you know, uh, what is it? What it takes to be competent in the industry. So, man, I think we would begin in about 3 to 5 minutes when more people join us. How about that?
Awesome. So I guess right now, like for everyone in the chat,
Yep.
I guess what's your background? Are you like taking classes right now in college? What technologies are your favorite? Drop them below just so I can like kind of get a sense of the crowd. Ground zero. Oh, so starting from scratch. That's awesome. So so today like during the hackathon, it's like a mixture of people with all different backgrounds. I saw they had like a few presentations for like intro to Git and everything, so that's pretty cool. And then some more advanced stuff. So second year computer science major, Java, C++, deep learning. That's awesome. So there's a pretty good pretty wide variety for it today. College student took some classes, learned full stack web dev online. That's awesome. Yeah, I think like when you're in school, they're not going to teach you everything for sure, and there's like so much out there to learn. And the great thing is like online classes are either like really cheap or free, which is awesome, and there's like a ton of stuff that you can do to like augment your learning outside of the classroom, which is great. First year college, mainly C++. Nice, nice. And is everyone mostly based in like California, or is it like all over the US or all over the world? Learning to code, trying to figure out what computer science is. Okay, mostly, yeah. Nice. Yeah, I live up in San Francisco, so right up the road. Northern California, nice. Canada, that's cool. Econ student with a minor in CS, nice. Django and Git, nice. And was there anything like that you learned today that was like a really good takeaway, I guess, from anyone? The Git stuff is really, really important. Yeah, learning how to use Git.
By the way, guys, you can always unmute yourself and talk to Matt. All right. You can even turn on your video. Don't be too shy.
Yeah, and also if anyone wants any like reference material on anything like Git or learning web development, you can like shoot me a DM after. I'll send my social media networks up, and yeah, send me a DM and I'll send you like a bunch of free resources that are like super helpful. Mainly that I used when I started learning, and they were great. And I honestly still like refer to them today. Let's see, becoming familiar with different platforms and tech options. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, Git, honestly, like it takes a lot of practice. I would like every day for the next 2 weeks, like just do all the basic commands over and over in Git. Like create like a, do Git init and start like adding files to the staging area, committing them, throwing them up to GitHub. Just like keep practicing that over and over because those things, like personally, I use them like every day at work. It's like super common. There are a handful of commands that you're going to use probably like 100 times a day. And like Git can be really overwhelming at first, but like if you just focus on like the absolute basics, that's all you need for right now. But it can get pretty complex, especially as you advance with coding. Is anyone intimidated by the command line or Git? I'm sure it's probably a lot to like take into the. Yeah, it's really, honestly, like command line is the one thing that scares almost everyone when they start learning. Like regardless of what language you're doing, command line is the one thing that everyone can agree upon. It's like really scary. But luckily, like once you get good at the basics, it gets so much easier. And I think the scariest part is like it's basically a blank slate. Like you open it and there's like no directions, no instructions. You just have to, magically know all these commands. Yeah, so advanced Git. I actually, so I can like, everyone has a student email, right? There's a really good course on front end masters, and if you enter your student email into the GitHub student developer pack, you can get 6 months free of that front end masters, and they have like tons of courses all in web development. They have a really good course on Git. It goes over all the basics and a lot of the advanced stuff. That's really good. Yeah, and again, I'll at the end of this I can send all the info, but right now let me just grab that student GitHub developer pack link. Because if everyone has a student email, that's a really good thing. Let's see, student developer pack. Yeah, I'll paste this in the chat right now. Honestly, like if you have a student email, you have to get this. It has basically like thousands of dollars of free software, everything from domains, education, like tools you can use online, ways to get your website live on the web. So definitely sign up for that. It's like totally free for students and it's amazing. Do you feel pigeonholed in one area of software development? You found that learning web development is so much easier if you get the nice visual feedback. You're not sure if working on web apps and design side is something you'd want to do long term. So yeah, that's honestly why a lot of people end up going full stack, because like some people don't want to pigeonhole themselves, like in only front end or like only design. But then again, like once you add on, like front end, back end design, all that stuff, you get less specialized in all the areas, which means that you might not be as good at one area, and it is really hard to like get good at everything. It just takes so much time. I would recommend, like if you do want to go full stack eventually, choose one area that you do want to get pretty good at, and then become like decent in all the other areas. That's probably the best way to go around it. Like no one can be perfect and know everything in like front and back end design, all that stuff. I mean, this is why they have whole companies of people like building these products, right, that you use every day. It's just because everything's so complicated. But yeah, I mean, like a huge mistake people make starting out is they learn like a million languages and they start bouncing between all these different things. I would recommend like focusing on one thing starting out. Get really good at one thing. That's how you're going to get a job, right? Like you're like most people do start out as either like a front end developer or back end developer, because that's where they have some expertise already built in. But I mean, eventually, as you go along in your career, you can advance. And for example, like I basically started out as a front end developer, and then I moved into being a full stack developer. And I still would say like I do like 60% front end, 40% back end. Kind of depends on the week at work. Let's see. So Yeah, and honestly, like long term, like eventually you can start really branching out, but like starting out, I definitely recommend focusing on one thing. You know, like if you're, for example, starting out with JavaScript, just focus on like learning the basics of the language. Then you can start learning how to like, add things to web pages. Eventually, you're gonna have to learn like some HTML, CSS to plug everything together. But at that point, like you don't need to go into React right away. You don't need to learn Angular right away. And there's so many other things that you have to know with this stuff, like extra, packages and libraries, all that stuff. But yeah, just focus on the basics. Like don't keep switching from like, web development to mobile development to desktop app development. And there's like so many different things you can switch between.
So I got a dumb question for you.
Honestly, no questions are dumb questions. Ask anything.
in you know, uh, what precisely comprises full stack? So we talk about front end. I'm taking a HTML and CSS class right now. I've heard about back end. We had the API session earlier. Is there a middle section?
So technically there is, and that's I would say like that's the data layer on the front end. So with the front end, you have the basically like the thing that the user sees, right? Like if you go on like a website like Facebook or like Instagram, what you're seeing is kind of like the UI layer. That's like what you're interacting with and what you're seeing. What you don't see though is the data layer of the front end, where like a lot of front end processing works. This can be things like displaying modals for you to like get information off of, or like picture upload, or like all that stuff like that. That stuff like that. The actions that happen, that's kind of the stuff that you're not really seeing. Or if they need to like format phone numbers, or like process phone numbers and process numbers and do calculations. Some of that stuff does happen on the front end, but you might not see it as a user. Like you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. So I would say, I mean, like, true, if you really want to go like all the way across the stack, it's like you have your UI UX, then you have, like the I guess like the UI layer, and then you have the kind of like data layer of the front end. Then you have the back end, all the API stuff, and your databases. Sometimes you can like throw in, I don't know, like a little bit of like deployment stuff in there. Then you have all your tooling, like things like Webpack, things like like pre-commit hooks and all that stuff. There's a lot that goes into it. But I would say the basics, like the absolute basics, are like design, front end, back end. Yeah, and it's I mean, a lot of this stuff, it's relatively new. It's not like this like, specific industry has been around forever. It's not like full stack web development has been around forever. It's like still a relatively new thing, which is why you'll find a lot of these people who are web developers are like, pretty young, in their 20s and 30s, just because it hasn't really been around that long. I mean, like, things used to be very, desktop app based. Now a lot of things have switched to web, just because web can be accessed from any device. And like almost like less native apps. I've seen like a lot of like companies, when they like build stuff really quickly, they don't even do a mobile app, they just do the web app, and then they build the mobile app after.
So on that note, when you talk about full stack, how different is it between mobile and desktop, or tablets and things like that?
So the amazing thing about the JavaScript and the JavaScript community is that they have so many tools now, where in JavaScript you can build mobile and desktop apps, which like used to not be the case at all. But it's great. Like for example, if you're using a framework like React for the web, you can use React Native to build your mobile apps, and then with Electron you can build using JS your desktop app. So it's kind of cool. And a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll have like one component library. So for example, if you're on Instagram, you have like the profile picture component or whatever, or like the upload button component. They'll just reuse those web, mobile, and desktop, which is pretty great. So I guess like one example recently is Facebook Messenger has a web app, they have a mobile app, and now they just released their desktop app. So they have all these different apps on all these different platforms, but they're most likely all built with like very similar technology and probably the same component library, which is really cool.
Cool.
Yeah, and like I mean, there are pros and cons of using something like React Native for app development. But for a lot of people, like if you're like a company or like a single, individual trying to get all of your tech up at once, that's probably the easiest way, just using, pretty much the same tech stack for everything. And the JavaScript community is awesome. Like they have so many things that they've released, and so many really, really cool, things. You can like build games with JavaScript. You can do so much with it. And the interesting thing is, like, generally JavaScript isn't really taught in like colleges and schools as much. So it is kind of like more of like a Wild West. A lot of people like come into the industry, they have to like learn it on their own. And this is, I think, the rise of boot camps, why this has happened, because there was a I guess like a mismatch of skill sets in the industry. Like, people coming from college didn't necessarily know JavaScript, so a lot of these boot camps floated in and like filled everything in with web dev.
Yes, that was actually going to be my next comment or observation. Is actually a Deanza, I think, doesn't teach JavaScript too frequently, but it sounds like it's pretty key to full stack development.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the main like disconnect is that, like, the web and tech is evolving so quickly, and regular schools cannot keep their curriculum up to date. It's really, really hard. Things like once you really get into front end, you'll realize how quickly things are changing. It's like, even when I started 3 years ago, for example, like React, like the framework or library or whatever, has had like a complete overhaul of their update. Like, everything looks so different from when I started. It's like crazy. Like, the way you write things, it's like super different. And yeah, like I feel like every few months there's like a new framework, and like, every day there's a new library being released. It's crazy.
I have a question. So with all these, like, there's like so many frameworks and like languages just within web development. There's like React, Angular, Django, Flask, like databases you have to learn. And then on top of that, they all change each year. So even if you learn them, then like next year they'll be updated. So how do you keep up with all this knowledge? Do you have like a set of fundamental languages you learn where all of them are kind of similar to that, and then it's easier to learn? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so what it pretty much comes down to is like, get really good at the fundamentals of, one, programming, and two, the language that you choose. So for example, like, let's take JavaScript. There are core CS, fundamentals that apply to any language. Those you just have to know. Then there are JavaScript specific fundamentals, and while every year they do add like some new features, it's not like the whole language is like changing like, every single year. Like, it's not like you have to relearn everything. They usually just add on different concepts. So what I did is I started with JavaScript and I stuck with JavaScript. I didn't do anything else. And for probably about a year, and then that's when I added in Python. So now, at the past 2 companies I've worked at, I've learned JavaScript and Python, and I still use those every single day. For frameworks, I would focus on one, like pick one. There are 3 big ones in web, and that's Angular, React, and Vue. They're all pretty big and in demand. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. But I would look at the job listings in the area and location that you want to go to, see what's the most popular, and probably learn that. Right now, React has taken the lead, from what it seems, from like popularity, and it has a really good community backing it. I mean, but honestly, like Angular, Vue, React, it doesn't really matter. They are all made to do the same thing, which is like state management in the front end. So it really doesn't matter which one you learn. And the thing is, like, once you learn these things, there are like, the skills are transferable, right? So like, once you learn one thing, like for example, React, learning Vue is not going to be too hard because they're effectively very similar. Angular is kind of a different beast. Angular has some different principles that it uses. It can be pretty challenging. But yeah, I mean, bigger companies tend to use Angular over smaller and mid-sized companies, which tend to use like React or Vue. But again, there's always caveats and everything.
Yeah, so last question for that. So do these languages like pair off? For example, if I learn web development through Python, do I have to pick either Angular or React or something like that?
Well, so here's the thing, like with web development, you're going to have to pretty much know JavaScript for whatever you do. Like, I would say JavaScript, like for a full stack web developer, you have to know it. Like, there's no other language you can like, build the front end stuff with. With back end, you can learn pretty much whatever language you want. You know, Python and Flask is pretty big. Also Node and Express, which is just JavaScript. Really, I mean, like Java's huge. Companies have, you know, any company you go to is probably using a bunch of different languages with all of their different products. So it really depends on like the team you go on. But a lot of times when you get a job, you're not going to know everything. Like a lot of people only know like 50% of the skills that are listed in the job description, which means you just have to learn on a job. And that's just how it is. But that's also like the beauty of this is like you don't need to know everything to land a job. And you can build your skills on top of each other. And if you want to make a switch in the future, you can. There's like tons of flexibility. So yeah, at my first job, I mean, I learned Python on the job. Like there, and I knew React, but I didn't really know Redux. So I also learned Redux on that job. So you kind of just like add in the skills when you need them. You don't need to memorize everything, and you have Google and Stack Overflow out there. But yeah, I mean, it depends. So why don't we, if there's no more questions for right now, let's jump into the presentation, and then after I'll make sure there's 15 minutes set aside for more questions. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. So let me jump in here. I don't think I'll be able to see the Zoom chat when I share this keynote. But yeah, just unmute your mic if you have a like urgent question or anything. Okay, cool. Can everyone see my screen? I'm gonna click present. Okay, cool. Yeah, if you can't hear me or if like the screen cuts out or anything, just unmute your mic and let me know. But I'm gonna go over like a quick presentation, pretty straightforward, and it's gonna have a bunch of things for you hopefully to take away that can help you with your learning and, you know, your eventual career. So yeah. So I want to go over a little bit about like my story, how to learn effectively, some technical skills, non-technical skills, job search tips, and at the end I have a giveaway. I do have a few social media platforms that I'm putting out content on, and I started a giveaway last week, giving away like a portable monitor for like anyone who just has a laptop who's like working at home or studying at home. And then second and third place get a few Udemy courses. So stick around to the end and I'll let you know how to enter that. Okay. Let me actually move real quick. I can't see my mouse. I'm trying to move the all the faces. There we go. Okay, so pretty much my story. I went to college for industrial engineering, so I don't have a background in computer science formally. When I went to college, I actually started out in CS, and that first class, I think the first topic was recursion, and that really like, you know, threw me for a loop, and like I was like, I can't do this. Industrial engineering and getting my college degree in that. So going through that, I did a handful of different internships. And I had one at a jet engine factory my sophomore year that I ended up doing a co-op for. So I took off 6 months and did that. And honestly, that was the worst work experience I've ever had in my life. And it made me rethink a lot of things. I think I don't know, it was like a bad work environment. The work was not enjoyable. I wasn't really learning anything. I was mainly doing like Microsoft Excel all day. And that is pretty boring, at least in my opinion. So yeah, after that, I ended up finishing up college in 3 years because I knew I wanted to get out and I just wanted to get my degree and not have to keep switching. And then I was going to figure out what I was going to do afterwards. So I ended up graduating in end of 2016, early 2017. And I took a job as a kind of like supply chain AutoCAD engineer, and ended up leaving that after 3 months and taking about 9 months to figure out what I was going to do next. So I grew up in Maine, went to school down near Boston. When I was back in Maine, I ended up selling everything, almost everything I owned on eBay to save up some money, packed up my car and headed out to the West Coast with no plan whatsoever. So this was, let's see, so I landed on the West Coast in June of 2017. And I had a friend who was living in Las Vegas. So he ended up letting me stay at his place for 2 months while I was figuring out what to do. I applied to like sales jobs. I applied to other industrial engineering jobs, and no luck. So it was kind of like trying to figure out next steps. What was I going to do? And I met a web developer on the road, and he kind of showed me like some of the stuff he's built, and it looked really, really cool. So I was like, you know what, maybe I should give coding another shot. So at that point, I ended up looking into like, how can I get a job without a CS degree? And these boot camps popped up to seem like a really decent option. So I'm doing a lot of research, and I reached out to a lot of alumni who went to these boot camps and ended up deciding on one. And then in, let's see, November of 2017, I moved to San Francisco to a hacker house, which had 14 people in the house. It's like 4 people per room, super cramped, $900 per month, which was ridiculous. But yeah, and then for the next, let's see, for the next 3 months, I ended up, committing my whole life to coding. So that was quite the experience. I think is the most fun I've ever had learning. It was like I've never been able to do that with my life. It's just like, commit 3 pure months of doing nothing else but one thing. And it was great. Learned a lot of like full stack web dev stuff. So at that point, this was February of 2018. There are a few times throughout that whole process I really wanted to give up. It felt impossible at some times. But I stuck it out and ended up applying to about 150 jobs. And in March of 2018, right after 2 weeks after the boot camp ended, I landed my first job. And that was a mid-sized tech company in San Francisco. They do a lot of communications. They're called Twilio. So if you ever taken an Uber, gotten a text from your driver, they're the ones who were sending those SMS communications. So at that point, at that job, I learned Python. It was still a full stack job, but I learned Python to add on top of JavaScript. In the bootcamp, I learned JavaScript, React, Node, HTML, CSS, some databases, Postgres, Redis, MongoDB, and then some scalability stuff. So when I got that job, I ended up, after 6 months, deciding I want to look for other opportunities. So I ended up finding a startup that gave me a better offer, gave me way more learning opportunities, and kind of like a promotion. So I ended up moving there, and I'm still here today, a few years later. So yeah, that was pretty much my whole story. Lots of unknowns. Definitely felt impossible. I definitely want to give up a lot of the time, but yeah, it was wild. And I honestly, 3 years ago, I would not tell you that I would have thought I would have been a full stack developer today. It's like crazy to look back. Okay, let's see. So that's pretty much all of that. Okay, so I want to go over a little bit of stuff around like in regards to learning. So for example, like school, they've ingrained in your head that like grades are the most important thing. And there's a relationship between grades and understanding. So for example, let's say there's a sorting algorithm, you're going to have a test on sorting algorithms. They want you to implement all of these sorting algorithms. There are a few ways you can go about doing that. You can just memorize them, do rote memorization and implement them. You'll get a 100 on the test. But the issue with that is you come out of that test and you've learned nothing, right? You don't have any understanding of how they actually work. You've just memorized them and kind of like, hack the process for the grade. And what I learned, at least coming out of college, is that like nobody has looked at my transcripts or resume or grades or anything. And I'm not saying like give up on grades. I'm not saying get bad grades, but like the whole reason you are in school is to gain understanding and knowledge. It's not about the grades. The grades will come with understanding. So if you do things like, actually break down these algorithms, start understanding how they work, once you get to a job interview, then like if somebody, let's say, presents you a question that you've never seen before, you'll be able to, use your tool bag of things that you've learned from all this different knowledge, and you'll be able to piece together a solution. And that is a super important part of getting a job, is being able to pass the interviews. So that's one thing that I would say is the most important thing, is figuring out, focus on understanding over anything else. As for learning, there are a few ways to learn really efficiently, and there are 2 ways to learn, active and passive. Passive is you read a textbook and then you close the textbook, go in and take a test, and you might do okay, but again, you haven't really learned too much because all you did was read. Active learning is when you're reading that textbook, start taking examples from the textbook. For example, like if you are learning the sorting algorithms, like start implementing them either like on a piece of paper or in a code editor while you're reading through this book. Do things, it will take more time, but honestly, the more time spent up front will save you way more time down the road. So really focus on active learning. This can be anything from, while you're taking an online course, you're, coding alongside that. You're building your own things after the course. Go in and take in all the knowledge you learned, and then build your own project. That's all of those are super effective ways to learn pretty quickly. Okay, so now these are the technical skills that are really important as a developer. You have a handful of different things like your operating system and your IDE. This can be something like Mac OS or Linux or Windows, and then your IDE could be anything from VS Code, Atom, PyCharm, tons of different ones. these are the fundamental things to spend time on learning. So this could be like, learning all the shortcuts for your operating system, Control V is paste, Control C is copy. For your IDE, there are tons of important things like Command tilde would open up your in IDE terminal, different things like that. They'll save a lot of time down the road, and super important to get an understanding on. The OS ones are going to help you outside of coding too, so that's super important. Then you have things like tooling. This can be anything like Webpack. This can be Git, the command line. All of these are also really, really important. And honestly, you should focus on these before focusing on any of the extra technologies. I think getting your tooling down is going to be super, super important. If I let's see, so like deployment processes, automating things using your bash RC, your bash profile, all of these they go into the tooling, and once you master your tools, you're going to become a lot more efficient with your development. Then we go into technologies. At a high level, I mean, like if you choose anything like front-end web development, you're going to want to choose your core set of technologies that you want to get pretty good at. This can be like JavaScript, React, Redux, CSS in JS. You can use there are so many different things that you can add in. You can swap out React for Angular, swap out React for Vue. In the back end, you have Python, and then you have either Flask or Django. Then you have a whole plethora of databases. I would choose a handful of these to get good at. And then eventually in a job, you're going to have to learn on the job to fill in the skills that you don't have. But I would say, choose a core set of things to get pretty good at. Then you have other things like planning. So for example, when I'm at work and I'm given a task, like let's say I need to build a new sign-up menu, instead of just jumping right into code, I'm going to go on a document, like a Word document, and start planning out everything I need to do. So in the beginning, what data do I need to know? What security features do I need to focus on? There are a lot of pre-planning things you'll need to do before jumping into code. And I'll talk about this a little more in the job interview process, but this also kind of wraps back into there, and I'll show you why in a bit. So then we have the job search. These are, I've 3 different sections for the job search. These are just some basic tips. So it is really good to have some kind of portfolio. I would say 3 projects is kind of the, perfect amount, 2 to 3 projects. I would say all of these projects should be, pretty well built in depth. They should be relatively complex. This can be something like taking your favorite app, for example, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, and building a full stack replica of that. That's one great way to learn a ton, because you don't have to focus on how the design works of the app. You already know how that works intuitively. All you have to do is figure out how you're gonna implement this with tech. So I would say one of the best ways to learn is to take a copy of your favorite application and build that out. Another project you can do is, you can build out a portfolio site and technically include that as a project. You can make some really great portfolio sites. You don't have to have a portfolio site. I would just recommend having links to deployed projects. Some other thing, for example, one project I did was I took a replica of how YouTube would handle their viral search in the back end, and then I built out a scalable back end. So I added 10 million database entries. I ran, I think, 10,000 requests per second through the system, load tested it, and then figured out with metrics how I could improve this. And I improved it with things like adding a cache. There are a bunch of different things you can do, but I would say have a little bit of a variety of different projects. Then we get down to your resume. Highly recommend your resume sticks to 1 page. Everything else from your resume can go into LinkedIn. Recruiters are honestly only going to look at your resume for probably less than 15 seconds. So you want to make sure you have the most important info in there. I would focus on as much technology, have everything be related to technology if possible. If you, for example, had something in high school, like a job as a waiter or waitress, it's honestly not really worth putting in. People who are hiring you don't really care about that as much. You can always add that to your LinkedIn, in your job experience. But with this, I would say number 1 on the top of your job, on top of your resume, you should have a summary, 1 line. You don't have to have a summary. This is all based on preference, but definitely have a skills section under that, or have that be the first thing. I would say you can break your skills down into either front end or back end technologies, or you can break it down into stuff like languages versus frameworks and tooling. But that is going to be the number 1 thing that they usually glance at. They want to know what your background and skill set is. Number 2, I would highly recommend putting your projects and experience second. So you can, project-based experience is experience. You can add this into your experience. Now, you don't have to call it like work experience. You can just call the section like experience. But in each of your bullet points under these projects, I would say have, there's like a general like formula that you can follow, and it's did X by using Y technology, achieving Z result. And Z should be something quantitative if possible. So with that YouTube backend project, for example, I built a YouTube backend using technologies like Node.js and Express, and I was able to increase the latency of my app from X to X milliseconds, like improve it by adding a Redis cache. That's one example of a really strong bullet point that you can add that will show a recruiter that you're focused on improving technologies, what technologies you're using and kind of how to go about that. Quantitative, you don't have to force every bullet point to have numbers. Like you don't have to force everyone, but I would say as many bullet points as possible, they should have some kind of quantitative like improvement. Then for studying, I highly recommend, like, you're going to have to learn data structures and algorithms regardless. If you avoid these, while on the job, as in the day of a developer, I don't usually use data structures and algorithms like that, the really intense ones. I usually use pretty basic ones, but in interviews, it's going to be your biggest bottleneck, and it could be the make or break if you get a job or not. So doing things like you can learn from books like the Algorithm Design Manual, you can take courses online for algorithms, data structures. Practicing is super important. You can practice with LeetCode, you can practice with things like cracking the coding interview, but it's going to take a lot of practice, and it's honestly going to make your job search a lot easier if you get good at those. Let's go on to number 2. Let me just move, oops, sorry. Can't see my mouse, so I'm trying to move the thumbnails of the faces. Let's see. Okay, cool. So job search part 2. The biggest thing you should focus on in the job search is reaching out to real people who work at these companies. If you send your resume into a online portal, it's a black hole. Everything is algorithm based. If your resume doesn't have the right keywords or anything, it's going to be filtered out, and nobody's ever going to see your resume. So what's the kind of backup plan if that happens is for every application you send out into an online portal, you should also be reaching out to a real person at one of these tech companies. And the way to do that, there are a few different ways. Clearbit Connect is a great application. It's a extension for Chrome, extension for your browser, and you can type in a company and it will spit out a bunch of people, like people with roles, and then it will spit out their email too. So you can see engineering manager has this email, let me send an email to this person. Another really good thing to do in your job search is track everything. You can do this with a spreadsheet. You can do this with applications. One of my favorites is Streak CRM. It's a Gmail plugin. And what you can do is you can track all your job applications into stages. So for example, let's say I got to the phone screen section of Google. I can add in there who I talked to at Google. I can add their email in. I can add the last date we chatted. I can add, what stage I was in. So that would be phone screen. I can add the company name, and it just makes it really, really organized. Then, for example, if I got to an onsite at Facebook, I would track Facebook with the onsite category, and then I'd be able to see what companies are in what stages throughout my job search. Honestly, this gives you a quantitative way to go about your job search and see the progress that you're making. And it just helps a lot if you just track everything. Things that are untracked are, kind of wasted. I would say consistency is also extremely important in job search. It is a snowball effect. So if you apply on one day to 20 jobs and then never apply to any other jobs until a month later, you might have gotten 1 or 2 callbacks, but then you have nothing coming up in the future. I would say increase the job applications you're doing and stay consistent every single day. So what I did for my first job search that I found was effective is I applied to 10 jobs every day for 1 month. And that pretty much let me get above 150 job apps. I think I got around to 150 to 180, and then I ended up stopping. But I just every single day applied to 10 jobs, and I use tools like Streak CRM to make that really easy. That sounds like a lot, but Streak allows you to do things like add snippets to your emails. So I can have a template. I can load up that template into my email, plug in the names of the people who I'm talking to at these companies, and just schedule an email to send out the next morning. So I would honestly spend 1 to 2 hours a day to queue up 10 jobs and then send them out the next morning with scheduled emails. It was pretty good. And Streak allows you to see if somebody's opened the email. That's pretty good to see, like, was my email even read? Like, should I, reach out to this person again or not? So I would say these tools are just going to make your job search quicker.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Of those 150 applications, just ballparkish, what percentage were you able to reach out to people?
I would say I was able to probably send probably like 120 to 130 emails of people I found. And if I couldn't find their email, then I would go into LinkedIn and send a LinkedIn message. And I would say, like, reach out to either a recruiter at the company or an engineer, and then try to get in connection with like who's actually hiring for that role, because chances are you probably won't be able to find their exact email, like which manager is hiring. But some people were really good in like helping me out, like getting connected to the right people. I would say I had a pretty good response rate from those emails. Like, I would say, like, 30 to 50%. Like, a lot of people did respond back, which is great. And even if they said no, at least it was like a good, data point. Like, what could I have done better next time? But yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, if you don't reach out to people, like, your resume is going to get lost in this, algorithmic based like selection system. It's just like these online portals they're pretty bad. I would just say, like, make sure you have your keywords down in the resume, but like that is one thing that's out of your control, is like, does the algorithm pick up your resume or not? And most honestly get trashed right away. Even if a recruiter is reading through yours, if you have like a really muddied up resume, or if you have a resume that isn't really tech based, like if you have a lot of these other things in there, like they're probably just going to toss it. And they might have only glanced at the skills, or like if you didn't have a skills section, they might just like toss your resume away, right? So it's like you want to like increase your chances. The job search is all about luck, but you can control how much you increase your luck. So while the luck itself is like kind of out of your control, the amount of luck you gain, you can at least kind of control that by just like doing, reaching out to more people, getting really good at yourself. That's actually my next slide. Cool. Okay, let's see. So yeah, this is about what you can control in the job search. So there are things you can control, things you can't control. Things you can't control are, yeah, does your resume get lost? What questions do they ask you in the phone screen? What questions do they ask you in the onsite? So I would just, only worry about the things you can control. Like, the things you can't control, don't have that, add extra stress to your life. You can control the quality of your projects and the quality of your resume. You can also, control the amount of knowledge that you've gained, whether it's, algorithms or data structures practice, and also your, domain specific tech skills. The last thing is the number of applications, and again, the quality of your projects and resume, the quality of your applications. All of those things you can control. So I would just, don't do too many job apps a day where the quality ends up suffering. You don't have to customize every cover letter, like, to be completely new. You can use like templates. You can fill in these templates. They have things called mail merges that you can take in variables. For example, Streak CRM, if you've added all your companies in there with names of people you're talking to, you can do something called a mail merge, where you have a template and then it just fills in all those variable names. So it will fill in like company name, it will fill in the name of the person you're talking to into your cover letter, and then you can just send that out. That's like one way to just like save a bunch of time. And I don't think cover letters are the most effective. I think I would still write them and send them out, but honestly, your email that you send out to a real person, that can be your cover letter. Like, it doesn't have to be anything extremely formal. What they're really going to care about is your experience, your projects, and also make it as easy for people to find projects as possible. One really effective way to do your projects, or like to add on to your projects, is to make YouTube videos about the technical challenges you might have had in the project, a technical overview, what you improved in that project, and then post that as an unlisted YouTube video, add the link to your resume, and then boom, like a recruiter can go in and watch that video and see like, wow, this is a real person, they're able to communicate. Let's definitely have them in. Like, that's something that really not a lot of people do to make themselves stand out. And the whole thing about it, sorry, my dog's barking. The whole thing about interviews is to figure out how you can stand out. So let's see. Okay, so this is the last part. Like, once you've landed, either a phone screen or an onsite, there is a specific approach you can use to go about these problem-solving problems. So they will give you pretty technical problems, usually algorithm-based, or based around data structures. So there's a specific formula that I've used and learned and kind of like refined over time to approach these problems. While this formula isn't necessarily perfect, it's pretty good to solve any problem that's thrown at you. So when you're either on a phone screen or an interview, it's best to do some thinking out loud. This can help you show your interviewer, like, you know, how you're like attempting to approach this problem. This will also show your interviewer that you're, you know, able to communicate. This will allow them to then come back and, like, if you're, for example, like getting off track or starting to solve the problem wrong, they can like correct you as you go. If you were to go in this like 100% silently, like they would have no clue what you're thinking. And if you get off track, they wouldn't be able to correct you. You can also ask for things like, you know, edge cases or other things you might have missed, and they'll be able to help you with that. So I think like you can ask them like, hey, can I take like, you know, a minute or two to think silently? And that's totally fine. But like most of the process, you should be talking a lot. It's almost like, you know, you're discussing with your interviewer, like you have an open dialogue, how you're approaching these problems. Another thing is the inputs, outputs, constraints, and edge cases. This is something to list first, like in either your editor, your Word document, whatever they're using to like give you this problem on. I would just write these out and have them at the top of your document. This means, like, for example, if I have a algorithm problem or like a sorting based problem, you know, my input is going to be an array, like a list of elements, and my output is also going to be an array, but it's sorted. And then you have specific constraints, and then you have like edge cases, like, is this array, like what happens if it's empty, you know, when I take it into my function? What happens if it has over 10,000 entries? These are all things to just, like, you know, have at the top of the document that you can like refer back to it. Then you should discuss your high level approach with an interviewer. This is just like, you know, how would you go about solving this problem without using code or anything? You can draw diagrams, do anything like that. That's a pretty good way to, again, like communicate and help them like keep you on track. After you've figured out your high level approach, you can then go into pseudocoding. This is usually just like, you know, writing your notes, how you go step by step throughout the process. Then you can, after that, go into the coding. You can usually, you know, do this like under every line of pseudocode, you can implement how you write it in code. And again, these are overlapping. You don't have to pseudocode absolutely everything, but, you know, it is helpful to have some notes while you're, you know, coding your solution. At the end, once you've come up with a working solution, then you want to figure out how to optimize this. So I don't know how many people are familiar with like space and time complexity, but that is one of the largest problems. And once you figure out one solution, you want to analyze what was the space and time complexity of that, and then figure out how can you optimize this over time. So yeah, those are all really, really important things to keep in mind when approaching these problems. And this also applies to like your daily work. You know, if you're building anything, you're going to also have to think about some of these, you know, pieces of, you know, data and all that stuff. And you're going to want to, you know, take a step back and plan before you actually jump into code. Okay, so pretty much right before Q&A. So I'm giving away a monitor. I have a 15.6-inch external monitor, and I thought I'd give this away because like a lot of people are working and studying from home and they only have a laptop. And I found once I got an extra screen, it just made my productivity like go way up. I think having a second screen is super important. Also for second and third place, I'm giving away Udemy courses. So everything around like, you know, learning and productivity. I just wanted to give away around that. I have a few social platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and then a coding community on Discord with a bunch of people in there who are learning. We have weekly coding contests, a bunch of people who are helpers who are helping out in like the different languages and domains. So yeah, feel free to check those out on there. The most successful one I have is TikTok. I had a few viral videos that ended up doing pretty well. But yeah, and we can go into the Q&A pretty much whenever. So feel free to unmute and ask any questions you have.
Hello.
Hey.
First of all, thank you for the information. Great information. So
hey, anytime.
So earlier you mentioned that in the industry, we should reach out to people. So my question to you is, what do we say or write in these emails?
So generally you want to keep them, you know, pretty concise. You don't want them to be like paragraphs because people just don't have time to read it. But you pretty much want to say, hey, like I'm looking to apply to this role. I have these skills. Can you maybe connect me with the, you know, hiring manager who's hiring? Just something, you know, really simple. It doesn't have to be like anything like you basically want to like, you know, ask your question as like concise as possible and just send that email away. Also attach your resume. You can also attach a cover letter if you do want to have something a little larger that they can forward. But usually, I mean, your cover letter can be your email. It's just like really quickly, like, what are your skills? What position you're applying for? And yeah, just asking them if they can connect you with like a hiring manager. And then if that is the hiring manager, just like show your interest for the role and maybe go a little more in depth if you found the right person.
Thank you.
Hey, no problem.
Hey, I have a question.
Hey.
So I've talked to several people in the industry, and most of them always say that you should learn to focus between mobile devs and web dev. But I also talk to other people, and they say that you should learn as much as you can while you're still young in university, because you still have a lot of times. So from your own perspective, like what would be better? Should we focus from now on between the web development or mobile development, or instead we can just start to learn anything we want and be like a full-fledged in the end? I know it will take a bit longer for us to become full-fledged developer because, well, it requires more time of learning, takes more process, but I think it's more beneficial if I'm not wrong. So from your perspective, which option would be better for us as students? Thank you.
Okay, so if you have a lot of time and are very curious, I would focus on, dabbling here and there. You can, build a really simple mobile app. You can really build this really simple web app. You can try out different things. You can build out an API. You can play around with databases, with deployment, all that different stuff. I would say dabble. Like it's good to dabble. It's good to be curious. If you are time pressed and your goal is to get a specific job, that's when I would only focus on a handful of skills. Now, like if you want to get really good at like a handful of things, like you're not going to be able to get good at everything. It's just impossible. There is an infinite amount of information out there to learn, and like this is why people have imposter syndrome, because there's so much out there to know and nobody can know it all. So I would say if you have time, definitely dabble, like have fun with it, try out different things. But if you do something like, if you want to play around with like web apps and mobile apps and desktop apps, like I would honestly just like learn JavaScript and then use like the different, frameworks and tools to build out that extra stuff. Like you don't necessarily have to like, only learn Swift for like iOS apps and then like, not use any of your JavaScript knowledge for that. I mean, this is why these tools are built. So it's like, one developer with one set of skills can like, build multiple different platforms and applications and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, like if something really does like pique your interest, like mobile apps, then like start with that. And like, if you love that, continue with that and like get really, really good at that. But yeah, I mean, they have like, tons of these different tools. It's like really easy to get swept up into this whole, like, let me learn everything and let me like switch between everything. And like, that is just like at the end of the day, not really that productive. Like, but I would dabble. Like I would, if you have time, like try out different things and figure out like what you really, really enjoy. And then once you figured that out, then pour more time into it.
Oh, okay. Let's say I would only choose one between mobile apps or web apps. Now, I've seen a lot of people ask these questions in most of the forums like Quora and stuff, but which one would you think more beneficial for the future industry? Is it going to be the mobile or the web? Because a lot of people say that we're actually transforming the industry into like mobile, but some other people say that web, it will not become obsolete in a long time, so it doesn't really matter. So if you can like only, let's say, endorse one, which one would you choose? Like which one would you tell us to take?
Okay, so I think like before I like say one or the other, if we take a step back and like just like think about it, like technology has already advanced so much and changed our lives, and it's everywhere, right? Like like every company has a mobile app, every company has a web app. It really doesn't matter which one you choose. Like there's always going to be demand in that area, and like as things evolve over time, you're just going to advance your skills to like keep up with that. So like if you're worried that you're going to be at like a disadvantage of learning one or the other, it really doesn't matter. They're like every company has demand for all of these different things. Every company has different teams for all of these different types of technologies. So I wouldn't stress about like, is this going to be obsolete really quickly? Because like there are a million different technologies in that like area that you can just learn and keep up to date with. I would say choosing between one or another, it's kind of tough, right? So like I feel like recently, like mobile apps, like people want less apps on their phone. Like we had like this huge rise in like the early 2010s of like people wanted every single app and they downloaded like a million apps on their phone, right? But like now I feel like people want less apps. Like they don't want this, like, you know, they don't want a different app for every single little minute thing that they have to do. But then the web, it's like, you know, the web is great, but there is something that it just doesn't feel as like good as like a native app, right? So it's like, I think it really depends, like, you know, what do you want to do? Like iOS apps and like Android apps that are really clean, they feel native and like intuitive to use. When you use a web app on your phone, right, it's like, it does feel a little bit awkward. It has that like awkward, like web browser kind of stuff. But then when you use it on your computer, it's like generally a lot better. I don't know, I feel like the web, the reason I love the web is used on any single device. That's what makes it awesome. Is like any device can access the application and use it without too much, like, you know, too many issues. You know, no installation issues, no like issues with like different versions. But I mean, yeah, it's again up to you. Like if you love mobile and want to like go into that, go for it. If you love web and want to like play around with that, go for it. There's going to be demand in both areas, and like don't feel like you're at a disadvantage choosing one over the other.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
Yeah,
anytime.
I have a question. So for people who are like just starting to be exposed to web development, and they're like, it's kind of overwhelming how many places you can start out at. Do you recommend any courses or specific places to start? And then like from there, we can get a good knowledge to like branch out a little bit?
Definitely. So there are two places that I recommend. I'd say one-off courses, while they're good, they're generally not the best for beginners. And what you really want to focus on is a full curriculum. Don't focus on one-off courses, because like if you're going into this, like they're like all these curriculums are already built for you. You don't really have to like, you know, piece together a million different online courses and build your own. I would say the two best on the web, they're both free, are freecodecamp.org and the Odin Project. They're both full curriculums. They go through JavaScript, HTML, CSS, React, Redux, Node, I think like, you know, SQL, Postgres, all that stuff. And then they like walk you through and you have to build projects along the way. They have really great communities and forums that you can go off of. Yeah, both of them are 100% free. I would recommend those. Like if you're going to choose anything, if you're going to choose something else, you know, boot camps are really good things to look into, but quality does vary between all of those, and they're almost always paid. I know in I think in Sunnyvale they have a boot camp called 42, which is totally free. It's pretty hard to get into, but it's a rolling basis. I believe they like, you know, you can stay there up to 5 years. They have a campus, you live there. It's closed right now due to COVID, but in the future I'm sure they'll be reopening. And I think it's like funded by like a French billionaire. I actually worked with someone who went there and they said it was amazing. They learned so much from going there. But yeah, I mean, if you go on the internet and you search like, you know, how to learn web development, you're going to get a million of results, right? So it's like, you want to choose a structured curriculum when starting out. That is the most important thing, because it will keep you on track, and it's the most efficient way to learn the skills to build these web apps. I would say, like, you know, once you get your basics down, like the basics of the language, and then all these, you know, extra technologies you can add on, then you can start doing these like one-off courses and trying out different things. Some really great things are like in that GitHub student developer pack, Front End Masters has really good medium to advanced courses. They also have easy courses, but they have different curriculums, like sub-curriculums that you can follow for different things. Like they have a CSS curriculum, they have like a advanced JavaScript curriculum, they have like advanced React curriculum. They have some really, really great stuff in there. So yeah, I think it just, you know, depends on you and your learning style, but I would definitely recommend to probably most people just go to Free Code Camp or the Odin Project and follow that curriculum. And also everything is like baked into those apps. It's like you code in that development environment and everything, like in the browser. It's awesome. And yeah, the communities are great. You can ask questions, they'll answer them. I would highly recommend those.
Yeah, and I find it funny how you mentioned, because I actually did go through 42.
Oh, no way.
And yeah, I went through their like what do you call it, their tryout thing, and I made it in, although I didn't have time to actually go through it once I made it in. But I don't know if maybe until you get really far in, I don't think they teach web development. They mostly taught like
Yeah.
C and stuff.
Yeah, I think my coworker, he like had all this knowledge with things like Nginx, and he was like really good at like API design and stuff. So I think he might have stayed there for like 3 years. So he had a lot of time in that program, but
Oh, yeah.
he was like really good. I was like, whoa. And he was like just starting out just like I was.
The Odin project, was that Odin as in Valhalla?
Yeah, so it's ODIN and then project. Let me actually pull it up real quick. I think it was, let's see, the Odin project. So I think it should be the odinproject.net probably, or .com. Yeah, the odinproject.com. So yeah, they have like a full curriculum. They have like all this different stuff, full stack JS, Ruby on Rails, Web Dev 101. Free Code Camp's also amazing. I love Free Code Camp. Like that was where I started. And it's just like really good. You have all these different, sections. It's great. I mean, they break it down really well into all these like subcategories. Almost all the lessons are like bite size. And in the end, you build up everything to like start, building projects. They walk you through everything from like, like easy, intermediate, advanced. And they also have things like, Python, data science. It's great. They have so much stuff. Let me just check the chat real quick too. Let's see. Yeah, I think we had some questions in the chat. Okay, yeah, Clearbit Connect is great. Thanks for sharing that. Let's see. How do you not feel discouraged by this? Just by listening to it, it sounds like a nightmare to me as a first year in CS. Take it step by step. It is really overwhelming, and like, you're gonna have to get comfortable with uncomfortability. That's just how it is. Like every day in my job, I'm presented with things that I don't know how to do. And you have to figure out how to do it, right? There's no guidebook on how to do this. And that's what discourages a lot of people, is because there is no like, manual that you can follow to figure out how to do something. Like everything is pretty open-ended. And yes, while like there are, concepts and like, general things that you can focus on to build something, like you are going to run into a lot of unknowns. And I would say like it is so rewarding once you're able to figure out how to do this stuff and build something and then have it go out to like real people who are using it, like real customers. I would say, I mean, if you do this for a while and realize it is not for you, that's totally fine to switch to something else. Like if technology and coding is not for you, there are plenty of other opportunities out there. And even in tech, like you can do things like, design, you can do things like project management. There are so many things outside of just like pure coding that are opportunities for you in the tech industry. But yeah, take it step by step. You're going to run into a lot of failures, and that's how it is. Like embrace failure. That's like it's like a stepping stone to success. That is one thing. Like if you are a perfectionist, you're going to have to let go of that perfectionism. I was a perfectionist. Like I was a huge perfectionist, and that was like the first thing I had to learn how to let go, because like every app you build, like even like Instagram and Facebook, like these apps are always improving. They are never in a perfect state, right? So it's like they're always iterating on their product, and that's just how it is. Nothing is ever perfect in tech. Like you just have to let that go. Okay, let's see. Applying regularly seems to be the solution, as well as including the right keywords so algorithm detects. Yeah. So I mean, like you could do like bulk applies, like 2 days a month, apply to like 100 jobs. But like I do think it's better to have like do 10 a day for a month. Then you have like this kind of like drip of applications coming in. So like if you do 10 a day for a month, let's say the second week you might get your first callback, and that's going to boost your confidence. You're like, whoa, I got a callback. But then let's say you like had stopped, right? You would have nothing coming after that. But like if you had kept going, then maybe like the 14th day you got like 3 more calls, and like the 21st day you got like 5 more calls. Like it's like a layered process, right? So it's like a snowball. Like the more you apply like over time consistently, the more like chances you're going to get. And that's why it's like it's all about increasing your own luck and like doing what you can to increase your own luck. Okay, so yeah, those courses and web pages, I'll just drop them in there. Actually, so You can DM me on Discord, and I will send you a bunch of, let's see, Discord. Let me just drop the link in the chat. And you can send me any questions you have. I'll send you all the resources. I have tons of resources on learning Git, learning like, you know, anything related to like Git branches and like Git workflows for teams. That's super important to know. I can give you like all these courses. I can give you like all the recommendations from the GitHub Student Developer Pack that I have. Yeah, I mean, there's like so many things. I need to make like a document of this stuff so I can send to people, just because there's like so much stuff out there. But yeah, the Odin project and Free Code Camp, let me just copy and paste them also into the chat. Those are the two paths that I would recommend if you are learning web development.
I take it you probably, or I would assume you probably come across a lot of program managers or project managers. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, do they sort of evolve from or progress from, or did they start out as developers, or they just, you know, learn software program management and aren't necessarily as versed as a developer?
So it's actually pretty mixed. There are three ways you can become a PM. So the first way is you go the technical route. You learn, you know, how to code and everything. You start building products, and then eventually you switch into being a, like, you know, product manager. Another way is you go and get like an MBA and you switch in that way. So you get more like, you know, business knowledge, and then you go into being like a product manager that way. The third way is gaining domain expertise in something. So for example, let's say your company has a, you know, I guess say like, let's say an onboarding portal for customers. So a customer comes in and this is how they sign up for your product. If somebody has really, really good domain product like knowledge on, you know, what's the best way to get somebody to sign up without dropping off, you know, halfway through the process, what are some strategies you can use? Like if they have a lot of experience in like that, you know, one specific domain, then they can transfer into becoming a product manager. So yeah, three main ways you can do that. So either, you know, go the, you know, technical route, you can go the business route, or you can go the domain knowledge route. And every product manager you work with might have a pretty different background. My first product manager had no coding experience. My second product manager did have coding experience. So like it totally depends.
Now, these are product managers you're talking about, as in different from program managers?
Yeah, so I haven't really worked with any program managers. I think program managers are like, you know, much bigger. They handle a lot more tasks. Product managers focus on, you know, one specific area of your company. So like, for example, at my company, we have like the team I'm on owns a Shopify app. We own a portal for merchants to work in, and we own a few other things like a few APIs. So each of those projects has its own product manager. And you know, each of those product managers has a bit of a different background. So you kind of do have to communicate with them as a developer on your own. And like a product manager is generally not your boss. They are like your peer that you work with together. So they will, you know, do a lot of the organization. They'll give you a lot of the requirements for these, you know, features that you need to build, and then you go off and build them, and then like ask any questions you have. And it is a lot of back and forth, but like basically like if you have teams like sales and marketing, your product manager is like where all that communication comes to, and then they relate to you like, you know, what information they got from there. And then you as a developer needs to relate information back to the PM, and then they, you know, go back out to like sales or marketing and like work with them. So it is a lot of, you know, communication that's like super important, and like there is a lot of, you know, issues that can happen with that. But I think if you learn how to communicate with your PM based on their background and their knowledge, I think that's pretty important. It's going to be different from a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
And I think program managers are like, you know, I probably after you've been a PM for a while, that's when you can like level up to being a program manager. But I think they're like they have like a lot more responsibility than just like they're much more broad, you know, they have broader responsibility than a PM, than a regular product manager.
Got it, thanks.
Okay, so let's see. What's been one of your favorite things about entering the industry? Do you have any regrets? What do you wish you had known before you started your journey? There's a lot that I wish I knew before I started my journey. I think I honestly don't have any regrets. While I wish I'd studied CS in college, if I had done that, I would not be where I am today. Like I would not have moved out to the West Coast. I wouldn't be in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. I guarantee you I'd be in Boston. And like there were like I just feel like that the most tech opportunities are here in the Bay Area. I think it's great to be here, especially to start your career here. Like you're just gonna learn so much, and like the Bay Area has a very different way of approaching building applications and like thinking about technology than a lot of the rest of the world does. I work on teams with Australia, like with people in Australia, and the way they develop their apps is completely different than Silicon Valley. And it's like very interesting to compare and contrast. Like they have a very slow, controlled approach. They take a lot of time to make sure everything's good to go, and then they release it. But in Silicon Valley, like you basically like, you know, rush to build things. It's like a very short-term mindset. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best thing in the world. There are cons to that too. But a lot of it is like hack it and put it out there. And you might have seen, like, I don't know if like you're ever on Facebook or Instagram, but you'll notice they like have like added a new feature that like is relatively buggy, but they got it out there really quick. Pros and cons to that again, but yeah, it's kind of like the Silicon Valley way, I guess. Actually, let me see. I have a whole YouTube video around everything I wish I knew. I think I also have a blog post on it, but I'll just drop in the chat. This I pretty much broke down like, you know, yeah, this is it. Okay, let me copy that here. This is like literally everything I wish I knew before I went into tech. How important do you think is a four-year degree is? Are companies actually looking for that, or do they just looking for competency? It really depends. A four-year degree will not hurt, that's for sure. Like I would say there is still bias between people. Like, well, I think it depends. Are you talking about a four-year CS degree or a four-year like non-CS degree where you then learn tech after, or just like, you know, having like a high school, you know, diploma? Okay, both, yeah. So you are going to be much more ahead if you do have a CS degree and you do want to pursue coding. That's pretty much a given. If you don't have a CS degree though, like do not get discouraged. You can get up to speed, and there are a lot of things that are not taught in college that are really, really important to know. Like for example, like all of this web dev stuff like is not going to be taught in college. Like you probably, the chances that you're going to run into it in college are pretty slim if you don't learn on your own. So I would say like if you're in school right now, like do dedicate some time to side learning. Like the curriculum that you're going through right now, if it is, you know, CS, you're going to need to like, you know, augment that learning with like extra, you know, courses and stuff, and like following free code camp. Like the things you learn in school, there will be like overlap between these, right? But if you are in school, I would say the number one thing to focus on in your class is like get really good at data structures and algorithms. Those are going to make your job search a lot easier. Like when you get to on-sites, they're going to ask generally like, you know, medium leak code questions. Maybe if you're like, you know, just going in for an internship, they'll probably ask easy questions. But there's like a huge list of like data structures and algorithms that you should be like relatively good at, and like just start as early as possible. Startups, I've had, you know, experiences with startups where they won't ask data structures and algorithms, but they'll just ask like domain knowledge. Like for example, I've had a few that have asked me to build like a mini React app in the interview. But I would say an overwhelming majority of companies will ask data structures and algorithms, and it's like it's super important to know. Even though you probably won't use them that much in your day job, it's really important to know, and it also helps your problem solving skills.
Hey Matt. So as some of us are, or maybe all of us are in the community college, and we are our end goal is to transfer to university. Some of us are taking computer science degree, but when we transfer the computer science degree, the major might be too competitive that maybe we need to go to our second option. Since I know some of my friends who transfer to university and then they go with their second options instead of computer science. So they go to, well, not so far from computer science. So let's say data science, cognitive science. Do you think they still have the same opportunity as a computer scientist to compete in the computer science industry, like those other major that is not straight away computer science?
I mean, I would say definitely. You know, one thing that makes you valuable is if you have a very unique skill set. So let's say like, for example, you got like a like a product, like almost like a product manager, like a degree that would match up with like the skills of a product manager. But then you also learned how to code on the side. You can combine those skills to be like a really, really strong candidate for a company. If you like, let's say like maybe did like an econ degree and then went to a like more of like a bank or something where you have to have knowledge about how that stuff works, right? But you also know how to code. You can combine those skills together and be really, really valuable to them. So like, I would say, do what you enjoy for sure. Like you don't want to do a major that you hate. But also, I mean, there are plenty of other reasons to, figure out, do you want to do a CS major or a CS minor? I mean, I didn't do a CS major and I'm still here and turned out fine and have a great job and loving like what I'm doing in the industry. I mean, it really depends. But if you do want like a head start, I would say a CS major is probably your best bet. Probably though, it's like, you don't have to do a CS major. If you can learn on your own, you potentially don't even need college. But like, I'm not saying drop out of college, but yeah, I mean, I would just start continue learning and be very like, consistent with your learning. Have side projects that you're doing. You don't have to like, do these like 100 hours a week. You can do, like maybe 30 minutes a day or like maybe like a few hours every weekend. But I would say like start, adding to your skill set. That's pretty important. But I don't think not having a CS degree is a bad thing. Like, yes, occasionally people will throw your resume away because you don't have a CS degree, but also other people might prioritize you because you have a mixture of different skill sets. And there were a lot of companies that were like, whoa, he went to this boot camp and he has all these projects, like let's bring him in and interview him. So yeah, I would say you're definitely not at a disadvantage if you don't have a CS degree. If you have the skills and don't have a CS degree, you're not at a disadvantage. Cool. If nobody has any other questions, yeah, I think we can call it a day. Yeah, feel free to ping anything if you have any last minute questions. But I hope people found this helpful. If you have any questions, best way to find me is on Discord. That's where I'm most active. You can also DM me on any of those other platforms. But yeah, feel free to ask me any questions you want. If you want a huge list of resources, I can send you a pretty big list. Just DM me on Discord. That's the easiest way to reach out. But yeah, I'll send you everything from like, useful resources for Git and learning all the Git workflows, useful resources for like, what to learn, helpful like cheat sheets and stuff. There's like, I have a pretty big set of all these different documents that have like all these different lists. So just reach out to me with like whatever questions you have and whatever, info you want, I guess, more on, and yeah, I'll reach out.
Oh yes, I think if there's no other questions, as Matt says, he also shared his website and his Discord on the chat, so you guys probably can save it somewhere in your computer. And the recording of the meeting itself will also be available on the Discord later on. And yeah, I hope that you guys learned a lot of things from Matt. I believe it was a lot of useful information today. And thank you very much, Matt, for coming and spending your time with us, giving us a lot of tips and information. That's very educational for us. So yeah, once again, thank you very much, Matt.
Awesome. And yeah, I dropped that the giveaway link in the chat too. So if you want to enter that giveaway, feel free.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Okay.